Sage Wanderer here, coming at you from my cabin down by the creek. So today I want to talk about how Congress could block Donald Trump from becoming president even if he wins the election. Dun dun dun! Hashtag Civil War. So this was brought to my attention by the congressman from Maryland, Jamie Raskins, or I like to call him Jamie Ratskin. And Ratskin says in an interview from a few months back that even if Donald Trump would manage to win the election, that Congress would block him from becoming president on January 6th, the same date of the insurrection. This is going to be January 6, 2025. When Congress certifies the election, they will refuse to certify the electors who voted for Donald Trump under Donald Trump's involvement in January 6, 2021, 4 years prior to that date, when they claim an insurrection occurred at the Capitol and Donald Trump instigated the riot. They will claim that Donald Trump is disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. But before we get deeper into that, don't forget to support the channel. This channel is funded by viewers like you. I get no money from YouTube for advertisement, and I have no sponsors. So you guys keep me alive and keep my lights on here in the cabin in the woods. Please consider making a financial contribution in the links below to Cash App and to PayPal and my post office box. If you'd like to talk to me more directly, we can do that through email. There's my email addresses down there as well. And we'll get back to the story now. So Raskins is saying that Congress could disqualify Donald Trump as an insurrectionist. Now, the states tried to do this. Several of the states tried to do this by preventing him from being on the ballot in the first place. This went to the Supreme Court. And I thought, erroneously, to tell you the truth, I thought that was said and done. Once they said the states couldn't disqualify him, then it was a done deal. However, what that ruling actually states is that the only people that can declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist and make him ineligible for being president is the United States Congress. So between those two things, it caused me to go into a deep dive on this subject, and I looked intricately and closely to the 14th Amendment, and it also led me to the 12th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution as well. And so let me paint the picture here for you. So Donald Trump wins, even potentially by a landslide, and the electors present their recommendations for who's going to be president to the Senate and the House in a joint session. They count the votes, they certify the election on January 6th, and it's pretty much a done deal until the inauguration happens around January 20th, 21st. And if Congress, and it only has to be a majority, it doesn't have to be 2/3, it only has to be a majority of congressmen declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist, then they can throw out the electors, and then whoever has the most votes is elected president of the United States. So conceivably, if 51% of the states, now it's interesting, it's one vote per state, and how that vote is determined with multiple Congress people from each state, I think is a matter of internal struggle. But at some point there, it will each, if they get it to a vote, each state will get one vote on to whether or not Donald Trump is ineligible under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment, and specifically Section 3, was designed post-Civil War to stop former fighters for the South, former rebels who engaged in the real insurrection, a real uprising that we call the Civil War, that a lot of them would be elected to office right after the war stops. And they were trying to prevent Confederate soldiers and Confederate generals from becoming potentially senators. And one person in particular was the reason the 14th Amendment has a third clause pertaining to the Insurrection Act, is because the vice president of the Confederacy won state election to the U.S. Senate, and this was designed to specifically block him. However, the framers of the third section of the 14th Amendment, the Insurrection Act, claimed that it wasn't just about the current situation, but they wanted to enshrine it in the Constitution for any future insurrections, for any future situations that might arise where a person that had engaged in an active insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. government, especially while holding office, couldn't be reelected or elected in some other form. Now, Jamie Raskin seems to think this is going to be a slam dunk, that Congress will simply declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist, his votes will be thrown out, and Kamala Harris will be president. So let's follow that line. Let's just say that there's enough congressmen and women to declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist and have his votes, his electoral votes, thrown out. Then whoever has the most votes, according to the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, now we're in the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. Let's say they cause the Insurrection Act to play out. Donald Trump is then disqualified. What's the next step under the 12th Amendment? The next step is whoever has the most electoral votes for president wins president. Whoever has the most electoral votes for vice president wins vice president. But remember, just because Donald Trump might be declared an insurrectionist, J.D. Vance had nothing to do with it. So, strangely enough, under this scenario, if 51% of the states declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist and throw out his electoral votes, they would have to then select, you notice I use select, not elect, but select Kamala Harris as president of the United States and certify her president, at which point Donald Trump would be out. But it doesn't mean Walz is in, because over in the Senate, they count the number of vice presidents' votes in that situation, and whoever has the most electoral votes as vice president then would win. So conceivably, J.D. Vance, if Donald Trump was the initial winner, J.D. Vance would remain vice president. So you could have, on January 20th, 2025, Kamala Harris sworn in as president and J.D. Vance sworn in as vice president, and Donald Trump banned for life from office holding anywhere in the federal government. Now, could that trigger a civil war? It could. Is there any legal and constitutionally correct way to prevent that from happening? Well, we're deep in the 12th Amendment of the Constitution now, guys. Try to follow along. But let's say Donald Trump is declared an insurrectionist. His votes are thrown out. Kamala is made president and J.D. Vance vice president under that set of rules. Where could the Republicans intercept that and potentially stop it from happening? Well, before you can vote on whether Donald Trump is an insurrectionist or not, you have to have a quorum. A quorum is 2/3 of the representatives in the House of Representatives have to be present at the time that vote is taken. So if Congress decides to vote Donald Trump an insurrectionist, it would require 2/3 of the congressional members be present for that vote. So if Republicans wanted to play hardball, and I would imagine in this kind of situation they would, that if they thought there was any chance that some of the Republicans would flip and go with the Democrats and declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist, they would just refuse to show up to work on January 6th. If they believed that was coming up for a vote, they could just vanish. And some have said, go stand out in the snow. But honestly, this would suspend that day the certification of the election and put it in limbo. But there's a hard deadline on March 4th, because it says that if for whatever reason Congress can't certify an election by March 4th, whoever for the president, whoever won the vice presidential election, which in this case would be, in this scenario, J.D. Vance, then he would be made acting president, just as if the president himself had been injured or killed or incapacitated in some way. So let me paint this picture for you of how this could go down. I'll give you all of the possible scenarios here for this coming election. One is that Donald Trump wins in a landslide. pulling along with him all of the Republicans for Congress, giving the Republicans in Congress a strong majority of Trump supporting congressional members, right? And that this new Congress that goes into effect on the 4th, 2 days before the January 6th certification. Remember, it's going to be this coming new Congress, not the old Congress, but the new one that's being voted in. If the Republicans have such a majority in the House of Representatives that support Donald Trump and are not about to declare him an insurrectionist, then Donald Trump gets sworn in and the Democrats can kick rock, and Harris goes back, Kamala Harris goes back to McDonald's to get a job. And I guess Walls, I don't know, probably will retire so he can make white guy tacos. So that's how we hope it goes down. We hope it goes down like that there is no vote to declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist on January 6th in the United States Congress. Now, it could go the other way. Harris could just win. In the case that Harris wins, she goes on to, and Harris and Vance are the next president and VP for the next 4 years. Another scenario is Donald Trump wins, but we lose a few seats in Congress, or the seat holders in Congress that are Republicans are anti-Trump Rhino Republicans, and they decide to turn their back on the party and vote with the Democrats and declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist. At that point, if they have a quorum and the Republicans don't smell it in the wind and decide to go rogue and not show up to work, they'd have to not show up to work till March 4th. 3 months or 2 months, they'd have to just stay gone for 2 months. But let's assume they don't do that. They go ahead and declare Kamala Harris president. The Senate would then have to do the same thing and count the votes, and Vance would have the most VP votes, so he would become the vice president. And that would be an interesting situation to have a Kamala Harris president and a J.D. Vance vice president. That would be very interesting. But let's say, I hope you're following this. This is so complicated. It took me a long time to get down this rabbit hole. I'm doing my best to express this complicated and sticky wicket of a situation here to you. But let's assume then that they are able to declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist, right? Well, let me back up. Let's say they try to do that. The Republicans smell it coming, and they go stand in the snow, or they disappear for 2 months and refuse to come to work and make this vote until that hard deadline of March 4th happens. Then J.D. Vance becomes president, and he would be allowed then to pick a vice president at that point. I would think he would probably pick one of the big names in the current campaign. So he would either pick Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or he would pick Tulsi Gabbard, or he would pick his best friend from college, the guy that introduced him to his wife, his buddy, his college roommate. I think they were roommates. If not, they were buds back in college and had remained friends. Vivek Ramaswamy. So we could see a scenario where the Congress tries to invoke the Insurrection Act, disqualify Trump. The Republicans in Congress get a whiff of it and decide to vanish, and then the March 4th deadline comes to pass, and the Senate is forced to then swear in J.D. Vance as acting president, at which point he would probably pick, say, Vivek Ramaswamy as his VP, and the next 4 years would be that administration. Now, having said that, this kind of tactic of denying a quorum or a 2/3 of people present at the time a vote is taken to stop a vote from happening is something that's been played out before. It's been played out in state houses. The most crazy one I can think of happened a few years back in Oregon, when the state legislature of Oregon was set to pass a vote on the assault weapons banning assault weapons in Oregon. And the Republicans, who were in the minority, knew this was going to get passed, and they were trying to stop it. And they used the method of not being present, so there was no quorum, so the vote couldn't be taken, as a way of stopping the assault weapons ban. But unlike the March 4th hard deadline in the election process that would require the Senate then to go to the vice president, since the quorum could never be brought and the election couldn't be certified, then unlike that hard deadline in Oregon, there wasn't a time limit. They had to stay gone forever. So it really wasn't sustainable. But Kate Brown, I believe was her name, was the governor of Oregon at the time that these Republicans tried to use the quorum exception to stop the vote on assault weapons ban in Oregon. And several of the key Republicans just hid out, and which really made the governor mad. And she put a warrant out for their arrest and instructed the state police to locate these rogue congressmen who were refusing to be present so the quorum could be met, the vote had, and the assault weapons ban passed. That she went and told the state police to go find them, cuff them, and drag them by force to the state house so they would technically be present and a quorum could be met and the vote would be made. Theoretically, the President of the United States could do the same thing in this kind of out there scenario. Once again, we'll take it from the top, as we say in the music business. Take it from the top. Donald Trump wins the election, has the most votes. On January 6th, Congress calls for a vote to disqualify Donald Trump under the Insurrection Act, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The Republicans see this coming, and enough of them split so they can never get the 2/3 majority required to reach quorum level so they can even have a vote. And then they try to stay gone until March 4th deadline, at which point J.D. Vance would become president under the Constitution, under the 12th Amendment. Now, having said that, at that point, Biden as president, just like Kate Brown as governor in Oregon in the previous scenario, Joseph Biden still president, right? Because there's a March 4th deadline, which means January 20 came and went and nobody got inaugurated, and Biden's president for a couple more months till they reach this March 4th time period, where then the Senate would be forced to inaugurate and declare J.D. Vance president, acting president. And in that period of time, from January 6 to March 4, if the Republicans skated out on their job and hid out so that they would never reach quorum, so they couldn't get a vote declaring Donald Trump the insurrectionist and disqualifying him, then Joe Biden might send the U.S. Marshals to hunt down rogue members of Congress who refuse to come back and help them reach the quorum, the required quorum, to make a vote to decide the election. That would be his only option, would be to, like Kate Brown did in Oregon, physically force these congressmen to be present at the state or the nation's capital, on Capitol Hill, for the vote on whether or not Donald Trump should be disqualified. Now, another portion of what Ratskin said was that if that were to happen and go down that way, that this would put us in a civil war footing, and that all of Congress would get bodyguards to protect them against retaliation. And I would say that if you went to this extreme of manipulation of law, let's call it lawfare, to have Donald Trump declared an insurrectionist because of January 6th, 2021, and the speech he gave in the Capitol, that some say caused the outbreak of violence at the Capitol, which, whether or not that reaches the definition of insurrection, might be something that gets sent to the Supreme Court, that might need to be clarified, right? Even if Congress votes on it. So there's a lot of different ways this thing could go sideways. It's crazy. The only way it doesn't go sideways, if we get such a red wave that Congress is dominated by pro-Trump Republicans. Any other shortcoming, any shortcoming in Congress, any close call in balance of power between Republicans and Democrats could very well result in a vote being taken to declare Donald Trump an insurrectionist. Now, I really think if they did this and the end result was Kamala Harris president, J.D. Vance vice president, that there could be a real move for Donald Trump to set up a genuine insurrection, that a lot of people might call for that exact thing in this scenario that we're talking about. This might as well be a coffee talk. I almost made it a coffee talk, except the outcome of this is very real. This isn't anything that's a theory. This is something that Congress is saying. Members of Congress want to disqualify Trump even if he wins the election. And that's crazy because they're the ones that are supposed to be protecting democracy. Donald Trump is not the threat to democracy. These congressmen that want to pin this Insurrection Act on Donald Trump to prevent him from ever becoming president again. This is why Kamala Harris has been saying over and over again that Donald Trump cannot be allowed to stand behind the seal of the presidency ever again. Not ever again. And they will do whatever they have to. They will do whatever they can. They will do whatever is legal and bend the rules and might even engage in illegal activity if necessary. Well, they have been shooting at him. People have been shooting at him. So they're going to do whatever it takes to prevent Donald Trump from being president. And if that's the case, this vote to declare him an insurrectionist, the Supreme Court didn't rule on it. They just said the states can't do it. It's got to be done only by the U.S. Congress. I reviewed the 14th Amendment, Section 3, Insurrection Act clause of that amendment, and it's very clear that the power of Congress to just arbitrarily decide without due process, without a trial, without presentation of any sort, they can just call for a vote. And if 51 of the states 51%, not 51 states, if 51% of the states, right, if 26 states decide that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist, if their representatives state that, and that comes to a vote, and it happens, Donald Trump is out, Harris is in, and J.D. Vance will be vice president. Bad news for Trump and Walz. Wouldn't that be something? But it also might be the catalyst that triggers real political violence, the kind of political violence we have not seen since the Civil War, that this could cause armies to separate. This could cause governors to secede. This is the most important election since the election of 1860, people. This is it. I can't do any more than I can do because I'm in Oklahoma, and I think nearly every one of us is voting for Donald Trump for sure. I am encouraged to see random man-on-the-street interviews in places like Chicago and Detroit where African Americans are declaring their support for Donald Trump and their dislike for Kamala Harris. Let's hope Donald Trump wins in a landslide and pulls along with him every Republican running for Congress, and that when January 6th comes around in 2025, that Congress has seated 2 days before a solid Trump-supporting Congress who will shoot down any attempt to vote Donald Trump an insurrectionist and disqualify him from the presidency. That is my prayer, that this then will just look like a normal election. But if it's even close, if even some of those Republicans are willing to turn their back on Donald Trump, you could see him disqualified, Kamala Harris made president, and J.D. Vance would be vice president. That's crazy. That's just crazy. Tell me what you think in the comments section. You think there's any chance it's going to go down like that? Do you think it's going to be a clear winner one side or the other? How long are they going to drag this process out? Could we make it all the way to March 4th and still not have a United States president for the next term? Tell me what you think. Don't forget to support the channel with your likes, your subscriptions, your sharing of videos, and your donations to the cause in the links below in the description. And we'll see you next time from my cabin down by the creek.